Pregame.tv, NFL Week 1 action. Tennessee Titans at our Pittsburgh Steelers. The Men of Steel laying 6.5, at least for now they are. And Steelers certainly look like a bounce-back mission team to me. Quality organization, 8-8 last year. Brian, they're going to win more than that this year, right?
You yelled at me last time we did videos because I came out early and said who I liked. When you say our Pittsburgh Steelers, do you really think people are going to think you're going against them now?
Here we go. Steelers, the black and the gold, here we go.
On a slight note, Marco is a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and he retweeted something today from the Terrible podcast, and I was going to retweet him back. I said, isn't that any podcast you're ever on?
Us, you mean?
Well, I was meaning it to
I tell you
Marco.
one thing, VR's not here, and VR is like working diligently on football and the like, but I'm fearful that the Silva fight did a double dose of damage to him because we were all over Silva.
Was that right?
And so Silva goes, I'm sure he's partying before the fight, and then Silva loses, and then probably drinking after the fight. Yeah.
I don't see many of those fights, but I did see the last highlights, and if I was his manager, I wouldn't be a happy camper.
Yeah, he does that all the time.
Does he do that all the
He's
time?
16-0 doing that. A little showboat.
I know guys that have won the Hilton contest two years in a row that don't do that kind of.
No, I do it.
Well,
I do it.
I'm being kind of sarcastic.
When I won the Hilton 2 times in a row, believe me, the mustard was off the hot dog.
If you thought Steve, if you guys have known Steve for a long time, if you knew Steve 10 years ago, you thought he had an attitude, just wait until after he won the Hilton 2 years in a row.
Yeah, then 2 years of getting of flipping coins in that contest, and that'll sober you up real fast.
It's funny. The Tuesday meeting likes you a whole lot better now than they did 2 years ago.
No doubt at all about it. You know, we're talking about Chris Johnson. Of course, I think of Chris Johnson, you know, in the movie District 9. You know, it's more like, and he was getting in some games 9 yards per carry. Now they should change the name of that movie to District 3.8. What has happened to the Tennessee rushing attack and Chris Johnson? He still gets 1,000 yards, but they got to hand it to him 300 times.
It's all the offensive line. I mean, you've got to have a passing attack to open up the running attack, and you've got to have guys on the offensive line that are healthy that can block for you. I mean, if get this guy in the open field, that's the key. It's sort of like the Barry Sanders situation. Barry Sanders is one of the greatest running backs in the NFL, but he was caught behind the line of scrimmage more than anybody that I know.
Record number of times.
So he's got to be able to get some footing and get out and be able to juke, and that's the same with Chris Johnson.
Absolutely, and I think also, you know, you got Jake Locker, and not having a quarterback that you really have to worry about. It makes it so much easier for the defense to go ahead and key in on the rushing game. You know, one thing people have been talking to me about the Steelers, and they're saying I'm very high on the Steelers this year, and they're saying I'm overly optimistic because Big Ben, he's fragile, he could go down at any time, but he went down last year. That's why the season collapsed last year, and I really think after that debacle with Charlie Batch and Byron Leftwich wearing the Bumblebee outfit against the Ravens, and those horrible games against when they played the 1 and 2 against the Ravens and Cleveland, all the turnovers, and they had to rush them back, and they lost to San Diego because Ben could barely walk. As long as Roethlisberger is healthy, you got to respect that. The rushing game will work. We know Pittsburgh's defense is going to be good. They certainly look like they're going to be, right there with New England dropping. They and Denver look like the two teams to beat to me.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I think Denver's still a little bit better than them. But, and then the people talk about the health concerns. It is really something you have to keep an eye on. But that guy, being from Cleveland, I hate to admit it, that guy could be the toughest guy in the NFL. I mean, the way he gets beat up all the time, and people are always grabbing on him.
Cribbs gets the living daylights knocked out of him.
I like Cribbs. He's a tough guy. Even though I went to Akron and he went to Kent State, that's our big rival. Everything I've ever heard about Jonathan Cribbs is he's a class guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know so you should hate Pittsburgh, being from that part of the country, right?
It's funny. I love the Pirates because they don't win. I love the Penguins because Cleveland doesn't have a hockey team, but I've always hated the Steelers.
Right, and they come in and take over, the Cleveland Stadium, and it's got to be difficult to take. So
it is.
I'm going to go ahead and make this one official here. Free play on the Pittsburgh Steelers laying 6.5. I don't see how that 6.5 can last. I'm going to go ahead and predict it closes 7.5, not just 7. I think everyone's going to see what I see. Remember, this team was laying 5.5 about week 5 or 6 last year at Tennessee. Yes, Pittsburgh lost the game, but they had the game in hand. They should have won it. And there was a few games that happened early in the season where Pittsburgh actually found a way to donk off games to Oakland and Tennessee. They get them both this year in revenge games. This will be the first of several revenge games. Pittsburgh gets their revenge, and I expect a week 1 blowout. Go with the Men of Steel, lay the 6.5 before it goes up.
Let me ask you something. If you're really confident it is going to 7.5, would you put maybe a double unit on 6.5, and then when it gets to 7.5, reduce juice by some of it back because you got that number of 7?
It makes sense, but I've got so many bets right now. Like we played UNLV over 2.5 wins. Lay $1.15 and lay $1.40, and I'm going to have my hands out asking people for a loan. Because I've just got so much money tied up. And it's not as easy as it once was to throw back. In terms of because you don't have the credit accounts and things like that.
Vegas, they got 5 different books.
Right. But absolutely, I think you could safely go ahead and bomb away. And although it does seem like people love to play week 1 dogs for whatever reason, you see that I guess the subset of bad team off a bad year getting that 7 points. People like to go ahead and play on them. But I think with the revenge that the Steelers have in the situation, I can't see this not going 7.5.
Well, while we're on the talk of opening week, keep in mind every year, guys, that the teams that make the playoffs the year before do not necessarily make the playoffs the next year. One of the things I like to do in week 1 is to go against a lot of these teams that made the playoffs the prior year, especially if their peripheral numbers, they won a lot of close games, that kind of thing.
Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, so you could get a lot of advantage going against those teams because the next year, 40% of them make the playoffs the 1 year.
Especially if you take Belichick and New England out of the equation, it seems to do it each and every year.
I bet you in the AFC, if you take Pittsburgh and New England out, just about everybody else is in that situation where if they make it 1 year, they can make it the next.
Sure, and like you look at a team like Houston, which would naturally regress, but their division's just so weak that maybe they'll go 9-7 and still win the division. So we're going to be talking football all summer long here, pregame.tv. So we obviously can't wait for it to happen. We got CFL going, and I'm excited about CFL. The season started out great, but I can't wait to be talking football all year long. Stay with us, pregame.tv.